The glass towers of Rexus Prime reached toward the purple sky like crystal fingers. The capital city of the Rexian Empire spread across the planet's surface, home to millions of beings from dozens of different worlds. Among them were the humans brought from Earth 30 years ago. The aliens called it liberation. The humans called it something else. Doyen pushed his cleaning cart through the Royal Conservatory. His gray uniform was worn and patched in several places. The number on his chest identified him as property of the royal household. He had been cleaning these floors for 5 years now. Every day was the same. Wake up in the crowded human quarters. Work for 12 hours. Eat the tasteless protein bars they gave the workers. Sleep. Repeat. The conservatory was beautiful, at least. Huge windows let in the alien sunlight. Strange plants from across the galaxy grew in carefully maintained gardens. Some glowed in the dark. Others sang soft melodies. A few could move on their own, reaching out with vine-like arms. Doyen had learned not to get too close to those. He swept near the fountain, careful not to disturb the purple water. The Vrexians were particular about everything. One mistake could mean punishment. A human worker had been beaten last month for breaking a vase. Another had disappeared entirely after talking back to a guard. Doyen kept his head down and did his work. Then he heard it. A child crying. Doyen stopped pushing his mop. The sound came from behind a curtain of glowing vines. He hesitated. Getting involved in things that were not his business was dangerous. But the crying continued, small and desperate. It reminded him of his little sister back on Earth before the ships came. He pushed aside the vines carefully. Behind them was a small garden area with a massive tree in the center. Golden fruits hung from its branches like teardrops made of sunlight, and beneath the tree sat a Vrexian child. The boy was small, maybe 5 or 6 years old by human standards. His silver skin was darker than it should be, flushed with distress. 4 small arms wrapped around his body as he sobbed. His large black eyes leaked tears that sparkled like diamonds as they fell. Doyen recognized him immediately. Everyone in the palace knew Prince Talon, the youngest child of Empress Vora. What was a prince doing here alone, crying? Doyen approached slowly. He knelt down, making himself smaller and less threatening. In the Empire, humans did not speak to royalty. They did not even look directly at them. But this was a child in pain, and Doyen had never been good at following rules when someone was hurting. "Young master," he said softly in the Vrexian language. His accent was thick but understandable. "Are you hurt?" The prince looked up, startled. His eyes were wide and wet. For a moment he seemed afraid. Then his face crumpled again. "I'm hungry," the little prince whispered. "My stomach hurts so much." Doyen understood hunger. All humans in the Empire understood hunger. The work was hard and the food was never enough. But why would a prince be hungry? "Why don't you eat?" Doyen asked gently. "Mother says I have to fast for the ceremony," Talon said, hiccuping between words. 2 more days. "But it hurts?" "Everything hurts. The Ascension ceremony." Doyen had heard the other servants talking about it. A religious ritual where the royal children had to prove their strength by going without food. A test of will and devotion to the old gods. Doyen looked at the suffering child. Then he looked up at the tree. The golden fruits hanging from its branches were Solaris pearls. He had learned about them during his orientation. They bloomed once every 100 years. Each fruit could extend a person's life by decades. They were priceless, sacred. Only the Empress herself was allowed to touch them. Taking one would be theft of the highest order. Doyen would be executed, probably tortured first. He looked back at the crying child. His hand reached up before his mind could stop it. He plucked one of the golden fruits from the lowest branch. It was warm in his palm, pulsing with a gentle light. It smelled like sunshine and honey. "Here," Doyen said, pressing the fruit into the prince's small hands. "Eat this, quickly. Don't tell anyone where you got it." Prince Talon stared at the fruit. His hands trembled as he held it. Then, driven by hunger and the kindness in the human's eyes, he bit into it. The juice ran down his chin. His eyes widened in surprise at the taste. Within seconds, color returned to the prince's silver skin. His breathing became easier. The pain lines around his eyes smoothed away. He ate the entire fruit, then looked up at Doyen with something like wonder. "Thank you," the prince whispered. "What's your name?" "Doyen, but you should forget you saw me, young master. If anyone asks, you found the fruit on the ground." "But that would be lying." Sometimes lying is safer than the truth. I don't want to lie, Talon said firmly. His voice was stronger now, fed and confident. You helped me. You're kind. I won't forget. Doyen opened his mouth to argue. The words died in his throat. Standing at the entrance to the garden area was Empress Vora herself. She was magnificent and terrifying. Her robes seemed to be made of liquid starlight, flowing around her like water. 4 arms, each decorated with rings of power, crossed over her chest. Her face was unreadable, smooth and cold as marble. Behind her stood a human woman in the black armor of the Royal Guard. Doyen's heart stopped. He had been caught. This was the end. Commander Hyejin stepped forward. She was the only human to ever join the Empire's military elite. Some humans admired her. Most hated her. She had enforced the laws against her own people. She had beaten humans who stepped out of line. She had even executed some who tried to escape. Now she grabbed Doyen roughly by the arm, yanking him to his feet. Her face showed no emotion, no recognition that she was hurting one of her own kind. The Empress moved closer. She looked at her son, then at the human janitor. Her mandibles, the small mouthparts that helped Rexians speak, clicked softly. She leaned toward Commander Hyejin and whispered something Doyen could not hear. Hyejin's grip tightened painfully on his arm. She raised her voice so all could hear. By order of Her Imperial Majesty, this human is arrested for theft of royal property. He will be held for trial, punishment to be determined. 2 more guards appeared. They put energy shackles on Doyen's wrists. The metal burned against his skin like fire. He did not cry out. He looked at Prince Talon one last time. The little prince's face was full of confusion and fear. He started to move toward Doyun, but his mother's hand on his shoulder stopped him. As the guards dragged Doyen away, he heard Talon's voice calling after him. Mother, no. He was helping me. He was kind. Please don't hurt him. The Empress said something in response, but Doyun was too far away to hear. The last thing he saw before they threw him into a transport vehicle was the conservatory growing smaller behind him. The golden tree with its precious fruit. The little prince who would never be hungry again, at least not tonight. And the Empress standing still as a statue, watching everything with eyes that revealed nothing at all. Doyen had stolen 1 fruit for a crying child. Now he would pay the price. In the Empire, kindness was not a virtue. It was a crime. The Grand Hall of Justice was the largest room Doyen had ever seen. The ceiling disappeared into darkness far above. Seats rose in circular tiers like an ancient Roman arena. Every seat was filled. Rexians in expensive robes, tall thin Telkari with their multiple eyes, even some humans from the upper service positions, brought to witness what happened to those who broke the rules. Doyen stood in the center of it all, trapped inside a glowing energy field. His wrists were still bound with the burning shackles. He had not eaten or slept in 3 days. His legs shook, but he forced himself to stand straight. He would not give them the satisfaction of seeing him broken. Above him, on a throne made of living crystal that pulsed with blue light, sat Empress Vora. Prince Talon was beside her, his small face tight with worry. Princess Nara, a girl of about 12, watched with curious eyes. Crown Prince Kael, the oldest at 15, looked bored and slightly disgusted. To them, Doyen was less than nothing, a bug that had dared to crawl where it did not belong. The prosecutor was a Rexian named Korvax. He was old, his silver skin marked with patterns that showed his high rank. Medals covered his chest, each one representing decades of service to the Empire. He walked around Doyen's containment field like a hunter circling wounded prey. Let us be clear about the crimes committed here, Korvax announced, his voice echoing through the hall. This human, this slave, entered the sacred garden without permission. He touched the Solaris pearls with his filthy hands, and worst of all, he gave forbidden fruit to a member of the royal family. These are not small mistakes. They are attacks against the very foundation of our empire. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Doyen heard the words clearly. Slave, filthy, attack. That was all they saw when they looked at him. The punishment for such crimes is death, Korvax continued. Public execution, so that all will know what happens to those who step beyond their place. More agreement from the crowd. Some even called out demanding immediate justice. Doyen's heart pounded, but he kept his face calm. If he was going to die, he would die with dignity. Does the accused have anything to say? Korvax asked, his tone making it clear he expected begging or crying. Doyen lifted his head. He looked directly at the Empress, breaking another rule. Slaves did not make eye contact with royalty. "I would do it again," he said clearly. The hall erupted. Shouts of anger and disbelief echoed off the walls. Several beings stood from their seats calling for immediate execution. Even Crown Prince Kale looked shocked. Commander Heejin, standing guard near the throne, tightened her grip on her weapon. Korvax raised his hands for silence. When the noise died down, he laughed. It was not a kind sound. "You admit your crime? You dare to say you would repeat it?" "Yes," Doyen said. "The child was suffering. He was hungry and in pain. Where I come from, you don't walk away when a child needs help. I don't care if the fruit was forbidden. I don't care what it costs me. That boy needed food and I gave it to him. That's what decent beings do." "Decent beings?" Korvax's voice dripped with contempt. "You are property. You exist because we allow it. You have no rights. You have no choice. You have no enough." The single word from Empress Vora cut through the room like a knife. Everyone fell silent immediately. The Empress stood from her throne, all four arms spreading wide. She walked down the crystal steps slowly. Each footstep rang out in the quiet hall. She approached Doyen's containment field. For a long moment, she simply looked at him. Her face showed nothing, but her eyes seemed to see into his soul. "You say you would do it again?" she asked softly. Only those closest could hear. "To save a suffering child?" "Yes, Your Majesty." "Even knowing it means your death?" "Yes. Why?" The question surprised Doyen. He thought for a moment before answering. "Because life isn't worth living if you can only save yourself. Because children matter more than rules. Because someone had to show that boy that kindness exists even in a place like this." The Empress was silent. Then she turned to face the assembled court. "This human's crime is theft," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "By our current laws, he should be executed." She paused, and the pause stretched out until the tension was unbearable. "However, there is another law. An older law. The law of compassionate intervention." Korvax's mandibles clacked in confusion. "Your Majesty, that law has not been used in 3,000 years. "Then we have neglected it for too long," Vora replied. She addressed the entire court now. "The law of compassionate intervention states that any being who acts to preserve the life or welfare of a royal heir, even at great personal cost, must be judged not by the letter of the law, but by the spirit of their intent." The hall erupted again, this time in protest. Noble voices rose in anger. How could the Empress consider using such an ancient law? For a human? For a slave? Empress Vora raised one hand. The room fell silent, though angry muttering continued. "This human saw my son suffering," she said. "He did not see a prince. He did not see power or politics. He saw a hungry child and he acted with compassion. He knew the cost. He accepted it willingly. That kind of courage is rare in any species." She turned back to Doyen. "Your sentence is this. You will be removed from the labor pools. You will serve directly in the royal household, and you will teach my children what you showed them today. You will teach them compassion." The court exploded. Nobles shouted in outrage. How could a human be elevated? How could a thief be rewarded? This was madness. This was weakness. This was the end of proper order. Through it all, Empress Vora stood unmoved. She waited until the noise began to fade, then spoke one more time. "I am Empress of 17 star systems. I command fleets that could reduce planets to dust. My word is law." Her voice was iron. "And I say this human has more honor than many who sit in this court today. The matter is closed." The guards deactivated Doyen's containment field and removed his shackles. His wrists were raw and burned, but the pain felt distant. He could barely understand what had just happened. He was not going to die. He was being given a position in the royal household. As the court slowly emptied, still buzzing with shock and anger, Empress Vora approached Doyen one more time. She leaned close, speaking so quietly that only he could hear. "My son could not stop talking about you. He said you were kind, that you made him feel safe. In all his years in this palace, surrounded by guards and servants and tutors, a human janitor was the first to make him feel safe." Her voice caught slightly. "Thank you. For seeing my son as a child first and a prince second." Doyen did not know what to say. He simply nodded. Prince Talon broke free from his sister's hand and ran down the steps. He wrapped his small arms around Doyen's leg, looking up with shining eyes. "You're staying?" the prince asked hopefully. "It appears so, young master. Good, I like you. You're nice." As Doyen was led away to his new quarters, he looked back once. Commander Heijin was watching him with an expression he could not read. The Empress stood with her children, her hand resting gently on Talon's head. And throughout the hall he saw faces. Some angry, some curious, some afraid. He had come to this place as a slave who stole a piece of fruit. He was leaving as something else entirely. Something the Empire had never seen before. A human with value. The question now was what would happen next, and whether the Empress's mercy would start a revolution or simply paint a target on his back. The news spread through the human quarters like fire. By evening, every human worker in the palace complex knew the story. The janitor who stole sacred fruit, the trial where he said he would do it again, the ancient law, and the Empress's mercy. Minji heard about it while she was fixing a broken ventilation unit in the lower levels. She was young, only 23, taken from Seoul when she was just a child. She barely remembered Earth, but she remembered her mother telling her stories about heroes, people who stood up for what was right, even when it was dangerous. "Is it really true?" she asked the older worker next to her. His name was Bong-Soo, and he had been in the palace for 40 years. His hair was completely gray now, his hands scarred from decades of labor. Bong-Soo nodded slowly. "I heard it from Hyewan, who was actually in the court. The human really did talk back to the Empress, said he would steal again if a child needed help, and somehow he's alive. More than alive. He's been given a position teaching the royal children." A teenager named Junho leaned in, his eyes wide. But why? Why would the Empress spare him? Why would she elevate a human? Old Sua, a woman who had seen 70 years and more suffering than anyone should endure, smiled sadly. Maybe there's still some good in the universe. Or maybe the Empress is playing a game we don't understand yet. Either way, one of ours stood up and didn't die. That's worth something. In the crowded dormitory that night, humans whispered the story to each other. Some added details that were not true. Some made Doyen sound like a warrior instead of a janitor. But the core truth remained. A human had broken the rules to show compassion, and the most powerful being in the Empire had rewarded instead of punished him. For the first time in 30 years, there was something like hope in the human quarters, but not everyone was pleased. In the shadows near the door, Commander Heijin listened to the growing excitement. She wore civilian clothes instead of her armor, trying to blend in. It did not work. Every human recognized her immediately. The conversation stopped when they noticed her. People turned away or found reasons to leave. Nobody wanted to be near the traitor. That was what they called her, when they thought she could not hear. The human who joined the enemy. The one who enforced their laws and punished her own kind. Heijin had come to deliver a message to Doyen's former roommates, but the message no longer seemed important. She found herself listening instead to the hope in their voices. When was the last time she had heard humans speak with hope? She had been born in Busan on Earth before the Empire arrived. She had been a soldier even then, serving in the Republic of Korea Army. When the Rexians came and offered certain humans a chance to join their military, she had taken it. She told herself it was survival, a way to escape the labor pools, a chance to have power instead of being powerless. She had climbed the ranks through skill and ruthlessness. She learned to shoot better than the Rexians, to fight harder, to show no mercy. She became the first human to command alien troops. She wore that achievement like armor. But to get there, she had abandoned her people. She had beaten humans who worked too slowly. She had dragged them to punishment cells. She had even executed 2 humans who tried to steal a transport ship and escape back to Earth. She had pulled the trigger herself and felt nothing. Or so she told herself. Now listening to humans speak of Doyun with such admiration, something twisted in her chest. A feeling she had tried to bury for 20 years. Shame, regret? She was not sure. Later that night, Heijin found Doyen in his new quarters. The room was small but private, with an actual bed instead of the sleeping shelf in the dormitories. There was a window that looked out over the city. For a human, it was incredible luxury. Doyen was sitting on the bed staring at his hands. He looked up when Heijin entered without knocking. "Commander," he said carefully. "You've made things complicated," Heijin said. She leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "I didn't mean to. Doesn't matter what you meant. Now you're a symbol. The humans in the labor pools are talking about you, saying maybe things can change. Some of the younger ones are getting ideas about resistance." Doyen frowned. "I'm not a rebel. I just fed a hungry child." "That's exactly what makes it dangerous." Heijin moved closer, her voice low. "The Empire is built on hierarchy. Some species rule, Others serve. That's the way it's always been. But you disrupted that. You showed compassion across the divide. You made the Empress admit that a human's judgment could be right and her laws could be wrong. So what are you saying? That I should have let the boy suffer? No. The word came out softer than Hyejin intended. She looked away. I'm saying I can't remember the last time I did something because it was right, instead of because I was ordered to. Maybe you reminded me of something I lost. Doyen studied the commander. Up close, he could see the weariness in her eyes, the lines around her mouth. She was not much older than him, maybe 40, but she looked like she had lived twice that long. It's never too late to remember, Doyen said quietly. Hyejin's jaw tightened. Don't get philosophical with me, Janitor. I came to warn you. The Empress spared you, but there are people in the court who see you as a threat. Noble houses that don't want their slaves getting ideas. Generals who think the Empress showed weakness. You need to watch your back. Why do you care? The question caught Hyejin off guard. She had asked herself the same thing. Why did she care if some janitor lived or died? She had stopped caring about individual humans years ago. Caring made the job harder. But she found herself answering honestly. Because when you talked back to the Empress for just a moment, I remembered what it felt like to be proud of being human. I haven't felt that in a long time. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. The humans in the quarters are calling you a hero. Don't let it go to your head. Heroes die just as easily as everyone else. Maybe easier. After Hyejin left, Doyen sat in the quiet of his room. Through the window, he could see the lights of the city. Somewhere down there, thousands of humans were sleeping in crowded dormitories, working jobs that broke their bodies, raising children who would never know freedom. He had not set out to be a symbol. He had not wanted to change anything. He had just seen a suffering child and acted on instinct. But now, whether he wanted it or not, he represented something. The possibility of change. The idea that maybe humans were not just slaves, that maybe compassion mattered more than hierarchy. It was a heavy burden for a janitor to carry. But as Doyen settled into his new bed, softer than anything he had slept on in 5 years, he made a decision. If he was going to be a symbol, he would try to be worthy of it. He would teach the royal children what it meant to see others as equals, what it meant to choose kindness over cruelty, and maybe, just maybe, he could plant seeds that would one day grow into real change. In the human quarters below, Minji lay on her sleeping shelf and smiled in the darkness. Tomorrow she would go back to fixing broken machines. But tonight she let herself imagine a different future. One where humans were not property, where they could make choices, where they mattered. It was probably a foolish dream, but it was a dream worth having. And it had started with one man who chose to help a crying child. The first morning in his new role, Doyen was brought to the private wing of the palace. The halls here were different from the service corridors he knew. The walls were decorated with art from 100 worlds. The floors were so polished he could see his reflection. Guards stood at every intersection, watching him with suspicious eyes. A servant, a Telkari with 4 spindly arms, led him to a large room filled with morning light. 3 young Vrexians waited inside. Prince Talon sat at a small table swinging his legs. Princess Nara stood by the window, her arms crossed. Crown Prince Kale lounged in a chair looking at Doyen like he was an insect. The Empress has given clear instructions, the Telkari said nervously. You are to teach them about compassion, about human perspectives, about... The servant trailed off as if unsure what else to say, about whatever you think is important. Then the servant left and Doyen was alone with 3 royal children who had been raised to believe humans were barely better than animals. The silence stretched. Doyen had cleaned floors and moved trash for 5 years. He had no training as a teacher. What was he supposed to say to these privileged children who had never known hunger or pain? This is stupid, Kale finally said. He was tall for his age, his silver skin marked with the first patterns of approaching adulthood. Why should we learn anything from a slave? Because your mother commanded it, Doyen replied calmly. But if you want a better reason, here's one. The view from the bottom is different from the view at the top. A good ruler needs to see both. We're not rulers yet, Nara said. She was sharp-eyed and curious. Why does it matter what we see? Because you will be, and the choices you make will affect millions of lives. Don't you want to make good choices? Talon raised his small hand like a student in school. Did you really steal the fruit just for me? I gave it to you, yes. Why? You knew you would be punished. Doyen crouched down so he was eye level with the young prince. Have you ever been truly hungry? Not just I missed lunch hungry, but the kind where your stomach hurts and your head feels dizzy and you can't think about anything except food? All three children shook their heads. I have, most humans have. When I saw you suffering that way, I couldn't just walk past. Not even to save myself. Why not? Kyle challenged. Self-preservation is the first law of nature. The strong survive. The weak serve. Is that what you believe? That might makes right. It's what the Empire is built on. The Vrexians conquered other species because we're stronger. That's how things work. Doyen nodded slowly. Then let me ask you something. Your mother is the Empress. She's the strongest person in the Empire, right? She could have had me executed with a word, but she didn't. She showed mercy instead. Was that strength or weakness? Kale opened his mouth to answer, then closed it again. He frowned, thinking. Strength, Nara said quietly. Anyone can kill. It takes more strength to choose mercy when you have the power to destroy. Exactly. Power without compassion is just cruelty, and cruelty breeds resentment. Resentment breeds rebellion. If you want to rule well, you need your people to follow you because they want to, not just because they're afraid. Over the following days and weeks, Doyen began to truly teach. He told them stories from Earth, about democracies where leaders were chosen by the people, about revolutions that happened when rulers forgot to care for those they governed, about philosophers who taught that all people had inherent worth, regardless of their birth or status. Princess Nara was fascinated. She asked endless questions. So on Earth, even common people could become leaders? In some places, yes. Anyone could run for office if enough people supported them. The idea was that power should come from the consent of the governed, not from force. That sounds messy, she said. It was. Democracy is messy and slow and frustrating. But it also meant leaders had to actually care about their people, or they would lose power. Crown Prince Kale remained skeptical, but Doyen noticed he listened more than he argued now. Once he asked, if humans believe in equality, why did you let yourselves be conquered? It was a fair question, and Doyen did not shy away from it. Because we were technologically behind. Because we were divided when the Empire arrived. Because sometimes believing something doesn't mean you can enforce it. But belief is the first step. You have to know what's right before you can fight for it. Young Talon absorbed everything like a sponge. He started asking the palace servants their names. He thanked the cooks for his meals. Once Doyen found him trying to help a cleaning woman carry a heavy bucket. I can do it myself, the woman had said nervously. You're a prince. You shouldn't. Doyen says everyone deserves help when they need it, Talon interrupted. You need help. So I'm helping. The changes were small but noticeable. Princess Nara started treating servants as people instead of furniture. She learned their names and asked about their lives. Even Kale, proud and resistant, stopped speaking to servants as if they were beneath notice. Commander Hijin watched all of this from her position as head of the Royal Guard. She was present during many of the lessons, standing silently in the corner. Doyen noticed her expression shift sometimes when he told certain stories. About soldiers who questioned unjust orders. About warriors who protected the weak instead of serving the powerful. One day after a lesson about civil disobedience, Hyejin approached him in the garden. You're teaching them to question authority, she said. It was not quite an accusation, but close. I'm teaching them to think for themselves. There's a difference, is there? What happens when Kale becomes emperor and decides the old ways are wrong? When Nara starts demanding rights for laborers, you're planting seeds that could tear the empire apart. Or they could make it stronger. An empire built on fear and oppression will always be fragile. One built on mutual respect and genuine loyalty might actually last. Hyejin was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked, do you really believe that? That people are better than the systems that control them? I believe people are capable of growth. Even you, Commander. You listen to those stories too. I saw your face when I talked about the soldier who refused to execute civilians. You felt something. Feeling something and acting on it are different things. But feeling is the first step. Just like belief. Hyejin did not respond. She simply walked away. But Doyen noticed she started asking questions during lessons. Small things at first. Clarifications about Earth history. Challenges to his ideas that seemed designed to make him explain more deeply. She was learning too, whether she admitted it or not. But not everyone in the palace was happy with these changes. In the noble quarters, Chancellor Korvax held secret meetings. He gathered other powerful figures who saw the Empress's mercy as weakness and Doyen's influence as poison. The human is corrupting the royal line, Korvax told his allies. Crown Prince Kale questions the natural order. Princess Nara speaks of rights for slaves. Even young Talon treats servants like equals. This cannot continue. What do you propose? Asked Lady Vex, a wealthy noble with extensive land holdings. We need to remove the human. Make it clear that the Empress's experiment has failed, but we must be careful. A direct move would be treason. Korvax smiled coldly. We need to make it look like the human brought his fate upon himself. And so the conspiracy began to form. While Doyen taught his lessons about compassion and justice, powerful forces plotted his destruction. They would make him look dangerous. Make the royal children turn against him. Make the Empress regret her mercy. The storm was coming. But for now, in the sunlit classroom, 3 royal children learned that kindness was not weakness, and that every being deserved dignity. It was a simple lesson, but it was one that would change everything. Part 5. The Chancellor's move. 6 months had passed since Doyen became tutor to the royal children. The palace had settled into a new routine. Every morning he taught lessons about compassion, justice, and what it meant to treat all beings with dignity. Every evening he returned to his small room and wondered if anything he said really mattered. But it did matter. The changes were visible now. Crown Prince Kale, who had once looked at servants with contempt, now nodded to them in the halls. Princess Nara had started a project to improve conditions in the labor quarters. Young Prince Talon befriended human children in the palace, playing with them as equals rather than property. These changes made some people very angry. Chancellor Korvax stood in his private chamber, surrounded by 5 other powerful nobles. A holographic display showed images of the royal children interacting with humans and other lower status beings. Each image was evidence of what Korvax called the contamination. Look at this, he hissed, pointing at an image of Talon helping a human servant carry supplies. The 3rd heir to the throne doing labor like a common slave. This is what happens when we allow a human to poison their minds. Lady Vex clicked her mandibles in disgust. My sources tell me Princess Nara has been asking about labor laws. Labor laws? As if slaves need legal protection. General Tarvok, commander of a fleet, growled in agreement. The Empress has made a mistake. This mercy she showed has made us look weak. Other species are watching. They see humans being elevated and think maybe they can demand the same. We must act, Korvax said, but carefully. The Empress still protects the human. A direct attack would be treason. We need to make her see that he is dangerous, that her mercy was misplaced. How? Asked one of the nobles. Korvax smiled coldly. By proving that the human is exactly what we always said he was. A threat to the royal family. 3 days later, Prince Talon became sick. It happened suddenly. One morning he was fine, playing in the garden. By afternoon he was burning with fever. His silver skin turned dark and mottled. He could barely breathe. The royal physicians rushed to his bedside, but they could not find the cause. Empress Vora sat beside her youngest son, her 4 arms wrapped around him as he shivered and gasped for air. Her face was calm, but her hands trembled. She had ruled 17 star systems for decades. She had commanded armies and negotiated peace treaties, but she could not save her own child. Mother, Talon whispered through cracked lips. It hurts. I know, my love. The physicians are working. They will find what's wrong. But as the hours passed, Talon only grew worse. His breathing became shallow. His eyes could barely focus. The physicians whispered among themselves, their voices full of confusion and fear. That was when Chancellor Korvax appeared. He entered the royal chamber with a grave expression, carrying a sealed container. Behind him were 2 palace guards and a medical examiner. Your Majesty, Korvax said with false sympathy, I bring terrible news. Our investigators found traces of poison in the prince's recent meals. The Empress looked up sharply. Poison? What kind? Terran nightshade. A plant from Earth, very rare, very deadly. He set the container on a table. Inside was a dark, dried plant. This poison causes exactly the symptoms the prince is showing. Fever, difficulty breathing, organ failure. How did it get into my son's food? The Empress's voice was dangerously quiet. That is the terrible part, Your Majesty. Only one person has both access to the royal family and knowledge of Terran plants. Korvax paused dramatically. The human. Doyen. The words hung in the air like poison themselves. Empress Vora stood slowly, her eyes hard. You accuse him of trying to murder my son? I accuse him of what the evidence shows. He has been alone with the prince countless times. He prepares tea during their lessons. He has access to the royal gardens where medicines and foods are stored. Korvax spread his arms, and he has motive. Revenge for his people's subjugation. What better way to strike at the empire than to kill the royal heir? No! Princess Nara burst into the room, her face wet with tears. Doyen would never hurt Talon. He loves him. Love? Korvax seized on the word. You speak of love for a human slave? Don't you see? This creature has manipulated you all. He has pretended kindness while plotting murder. Commander Hyejin stood near the door, her hand on her weapon. She had been present when Korvax made his accusation, and something felt wrong about it. Terran Nightshade was almost extinct. How would a janitor get access to it? And why would Doyen poison the one child he had risked his life to save? But she said nothing. Years of following orders kept her silent. Bring him here, the Empress commanded. Now. Guards found Doyen in the garden tending to some earth flowers he had been growing for his lessons. They grabbed him roughly and dragged him to the royal chamber. He saw Talon lying pale and gasping on the bed and immediately tried to go to him. Hyejin blocked his path. Did you poison my son? The Empress's voice could have frozen stars. Doyen looked genuinely shocked. What, no? Your Majesty, I would never hurt Talon. Never, I care about him. All of your children. I would die before harming them. Terran Nightshade was found in his food. You are the only human with access to the royal family and knowledge of earth plants. I don't even know what Terran Nightshade looks like. I'm not a botanist. He struggled for words. I'm just someone who cares about that boy. Please, you have to believe me. Convenient lies, Korvax interjected. Your Majesty, for the safety of your family and the Empire, this human must be executed. Immediately. We cannot risk. Wait. Commander Hyejin's voice cut through the room. Everyone turned to look at her. She stepped forward, her heart pounding. She was about to question a high-ranking noble in front of the Empress. It could cost her everything, but she remembered Doyen's lessons about choosing what was right over what was safe. Your Majesty, may I speak? Empress Vora nodded curtly. Terran Nightshade is one of the rarest plants in the galaxy. It was almost completely wiped out during Earth's conquest. There are only a handful of places where it still grows. She locked eyes with Korvax. One of those places is the private conservatory of House Korvax. The Chancellor's mandibles clacked nervously. That proves nothing. Perhaps the human stole from my house, or... Your conservatory is sealed with genetic locks, Hyejin continued. Only members of House Korvax can enter. No one else. Not humans. Not other nobles. Only your bloodline. The Empress stood very still. Is this true, Chancellor? Well, yes, but that doesn't mean... Commander Hyejin, you have permission to search the Chancellor's private chambers. Immediately. Korvax's calm facade cracked. Your Majesty, this is outrageous. You would violate my privacy based on accusations from a human sympathizer. If you are innocent, you have nothing to fear. Guards, accompany the commander. If Korvax tries to interfere, arrest him. The search took less than an hour. In a hidden compartment in Korvax's chamber, they found everything. Vials of Terran Nightshade extract. Detailed plans for poisoning the prince. Correspondence with other nobles about using Talon's death to discredit Doyen and reverse the Empress's reforms. And a list of other humans who would be executed after Doyen to send a message. When the evidence was presented, Korvax finally broke. He ranted about the natural order being disrupted, about how the Empress was weak for showing mercy to humans, about how the Empire would fall if species were treated as equals. The Empress listened to all of it with a face of stone. Then she passed judgment. You will be executed for treason, all co-conspirators as well. Your houses will be stripped of rank and property, and your name will be erased from imperial records. It will be as if you never existed. As guards dragged Korvax away, the Empress turned to Doyen. For a moment, her iron control slipped. Tears shone in her eyes. I am sorry. I doubted you. That doesn't matter now, Doyen said urgently. What matters is saving Talon. Do your physicians have an antidote? The head physician shook his head. We have nothing for Terran Nightshade. We don't know enough about Earth biology. The prince has hours at most. Doyen's mind raced. His grandmother had been a healer before the conquest. She had taught him old remedies, folk medicine passed down through generations. Terran Nightshade. She had mentioned it once. What had she said? I might know something, he said desperately. It's not guaranteed. It's old Earth medicine, not science. But it's all we have. Do it, the Empress commanded. Doyen worked through the night with Princess Nara and Commander Hiejin helping him. They gathered activated charcoal from the palace forges, milk thistle from the gardens, other herbs his grandmother had mentioned. He mixed them according to half-remembered instructions, praying he remembered correctly. As dawn touched the sky, they gave the mixture to Talon. For long minutes, nothing happened. Then the prince's breathing eased slightly. Color began returning to his skin. His eyes fluttered open. Doyen, he whispered. You're here. The janitor-turned-tutor smiled through exhausted tears. Always, little prince, always. Talon reached out with a small hand. Doyen took it gently. I knew you didn't hurt me, Talon said. You're my friend. And in that moment, as a human held a prince's hand and the Empress wept with relief, something fundamental shifted in the Empire. Because they all understood now that the lines between species, between ruler and servant, were not as clear as they had believed. Sometimes a slave could be the most noble person in the room. Sometimes Merc, the attempted murder of Prince Talon, changed everything. News spread through the Empire like a shockwave. A high-ranking chancellor had tried to poison a royal child just to remove a human from influence. The conspiracy had involved nobles from 5 powerful houses. And a human, using nothing but old Earth medicine, had saved the prince when the Empire's best physicians could not. The executions were public. Thousands watched as Korvax and his co-conspirators faced justice. But more importantly, the trial revealed the depth of hatred toward humans among the ruling class. The communications that were read aloud showed plans not just to kill Doyen, but to purge all humans from positions of any influence. To tighten control and make the subjugation permanent. It forced the Empire to look at itself and see something ugly. Empress Vora called a special council meeting 2 weeks after Talon recovered. Present were the remaining nobles, military leaders, planetary governors, and for the first time in the Empire's history, representatives from the human labor pools. Doyen stood with Minji, the young mechanic, and Bongsu, the elderly worker who had spent 40 years in servitude. Commander Hiejin stood with them, no longer wearing her military uniform but dressed in the formal robes of a diplomatic advisor. The Empress spoke to the assembled crowd with her 3 children standing beside her. For 300 years, humanity has served this empire as laborers. We told ourselves it was necessary, that they were weaker and needed our guidance, that our conquest of Earth was for their own good. She paused, her forearms spread wide. But this poisoning has shown me what I should have seen long ago. A system built on subjugation breeds only resentment and cruelty. She gestured to Doyen. This man showed me that compassion can cross all boundaries. He risked his life twice for my son. Once to feed him, once to save him. Meanwhile, nobles draped in privilege chose to murder a child to preserve their power. Her voice hardened. What kind of order requires murdering children? Murmurs ran through the crowd. Some nobles looked uncomfortable. Others nodded slowly. Minji raised a trembling hand. The Empress acknowledged her. Your Majesty, what are you saying? Are you going to free us? I am offering you a choice. The Empress activated a massive holographic display. It showed Earth, green and blue and beautiful. I cannot change overnight what was built over centuries. The Empire needs workers, and Earth needs our protection from hostile species. But I can offer this. Any human who wishes to return to Earth may do so. You will be given compensation for your years of service. Enough to rebuild your lives. Shocked silence filled the hall. Those who stay will be granted full citizenship. You will receive wages, legal rights, the same protections as any other species in the Empire. And you will never again be called slaves. The hall erupted. Nobles shouted objections. How could the Empire function without human labor? How could they grant citizenship to former slaves? This would disrupt everything. The Empress raised one hand. Silence fell. Additionally, I am creating a new position, Human Ambassador to the Imperial Court. This person will represent human interests directly to me. She looked at Commander Hiejin. Commander, you have walked both worlds. You have enforced our laws, yes, but you also spoke truth when it mattered most. You uncovered the conspiracy. You stood with Doyen when you could have stayed silent. Will you accept this role? Hiejin looked shocked. Your Majesty, I have done terrible things to my own people. They have every reason to hate me. I'm not sure I can. Earning their trust will be part of your redemption, the Empress interrupted gently, if you choose to accept. Hijin looked at the human representatives. Minji met her eyes and gave a small nod. Bongsu did the same. Even Doyen smiled encouragingly. I accept, Hijin said quietly. An old human named Sua, brought from the labor quarters specifically for this meeting, stood on shaking legs. The Empress gave her permission to speak. Why now? Sua asked, her voice carrying across the silent hall. Why, after 300 years of slavery, do you choose this moment to change? The Empress looked at her children. Crown Prince Kale stepped forward. Because we learned something, the young prince said. His voice was strong and clear. We learned that strength without kindness is just cruelty. We learned that conquering someone doesn't make you better than them. And we learned that if we're strong enough to conquer, we should be strong enough to be kind. Princess Nara spoke next. Doyen taught us to see servants as people. Once you see that, you can't unsee it. We can't go back to treating humans as property, not anymore. Little Prince Talon, still pale but recovering, added his voice, and I don't want to live in an empire that would hurt good people like Doyen. If that's what it takes to maintain order, then the order is wrong. The Empress nodded. My children understand what I was too slow to see. The empire will change, slowly, carefully, but it will change. Or it will fall, as all empires built on oppression eventually fall. I choose change. The transformation began immediately. It was complicated and messy. Some humans took the offer to return to Earth, carrying wealth enough to start new lives. They sailed back to a planet that was beginning to rebuild, carrying hope and resources. Others stayed curious about this new citizenship. They enrolled in schools, applied for jobs previously forbidden to them, moved out of the cramped labor quarters into real homes. It was not easy. Some Vrexians and other species resented the changes. There were protests. A few small riots. On one outer world, traditional nobles attempted a rebellion. But the young generation, raised with new ideas about equality and dignity, helped spread the reforms. Commander Hyojin, now Ambassador Hyojin, worked tirelessly. She visited the human quarters regularly, though she was often met with suspicion and anger. You killed our people, a young human man shouted at her during one visit. You wore their uniform. You enforced their laws. And now you pretend to represent us? Hyojin did not flinch. You're right. I did all of those things. I can't undo them. But I can try to make sure your children never have to make the choices I made. I can fight so no human child grows up as a slave. Judge me by what I do now, not just what I did before. Slowly, grudgingly, trust began to build. Minji became Hyojin's assistant, bridging the gap between the ambassador's authority and the workers' fears. Together they drafted new labor laws, established education programs, created pathways for humans to enter every profession in the empire. Doyen continued teaching, but now his role expanded. All noble children in the capital were required to take classes about Earth history and human culture. The idea of humans as merely laborers began to fade, replaced by understanding and sometimes respect. Crown Prince Kale, who had been the most resistant to Doyen's lessons, surprised everyone by requesting to visit Earth. When he returned, he reported to the full court. They're building something incredible there. Cities rising from ruins. Art, music, democracy returning. They're creating beauty from devastation. He looked directly at the assembled nobles. If we had destroyed all of that for the sake of conquest, we would have been monsters. Maybe we were monsters. But we don't have to stay that way. Princess Nara enrolled in the Imperial University, studying alongside humans and other species. She wrote papers on interspecies ethics. She brought her classmates to the palace, and slowly, the rigid hierarchies of court began to blur. Young Prince Talon declared that when he grew up, he wanted to be like Doyen. Not a janitor, he clarified, but someone who helped people even when it was hard. Someone who did the right thing even when it cost everything. The changes were not perfect. Old prejudices died hard. There were setbacks and struggles. But the direction was clear. The empire was becoming something it had never been before. Something better. One evening, a year after the poisoning, Empress Vora stood on her balcony with Doyen beside her. Do you ever regret it? She asked. That first act of theft? It would have been safer to walk away. Doyen smiled. Every day I'm grateful I didn't, though I never expected it to lead to all this. You changed my children. You changed me. You changed an empire. She looked out over the city where humans now walked as citizens, all because you couldn't bear to see a child suffer. Compassion isn't complicated, Doyen said. It's just hard, but it's always worth it. Below them, in the streets of the capital, a human child laughed as she played with a Vrexian child. Their parents watched together, talking like equals. It was a small moment, but it was one that would have been impossible a year ago. Change had come to the empire, not through violence or revolution, but through one man choosing kindness when it would have been easier to look away. And that, the Empress thought, was the most human thing of all. Doyen stood on the balcony of the Imperial Palace, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of purple and gold. His hair was completely gray now, his face lined with age. He was in his 50s, and his hands sometimes ached from the years of hard labor before his life had changed. But his eyes were still kind, and his smile was still warm. Beautiful, isn't it? Empress Vora joined him on the balcony. She had aged gracefully, her silver skin marked with patterns that showed wisdom and long rule. Hard to believe how much has changed. Sometimes I still can't believe any of it happened, Doyen admitted. I was just a janitor trying to help a hungry child. And look what that became. The empire had transformed beyond recognition. Humans now served as scientists, diplomats, artists, military officers, and advisors. 3 humans sat on the Imperial Council, the highest governing body. Earth had been granted autonomous governance, managing its own affairs while contributing to the broader civilization. The changes had not come without struggle. There had been resistance from traditionalists, attempted coups, even a brief civil war on one of the outer worlds where nobles refused to accept the new order. But each conflict had been resolved, and each resolution had made the empire stronger. Ambassador Heijin approached them on the balcony. She wore formal robes now instead of armor, her hair streaked with gray like Doyun's. 20 years of bridge building had transformed her from a feared enforcer into a respected diplomat. The council vote just finished, she reported. The Human Rights Charter passed unanimously. It's now illegal across all 17 systems to own sentient beings as property. We're extending the same protections to 3 other species currently in subjugation. 3 down, 14 to go, Empress Vora noted. Full liberation of all species will take another generation at least. But it's happening, Heijin said. And it started because one man chose compassion over safety. Across the city in the Imperial University, Princess Nara taught a class on interspecies ethics. She was 32 now, a renowned scholar and advisor to her mother. Her classroom held students from a dozen different worlds. Humans, Vrexians, Telkari, and many others studied together as equals. Today we discuss what historians call the turning point moment, Nara began. The moment when Doyun, a human janitor, stole sacred fruit to feed my brother. This single act of compassion changed the course of our civilization. A young human student raised her hand. Professor, isn't it convenient that the Empress was already inclined toward mercy? What if Doyen had been caught by a different ruler? Nara smiled. It was a good question. You're right to ask. We don't know what would have happened. Maybe he would have died and nothing would have changed. But here's what matters. He acted anyway. He didn't choose compassion because it was safe or convenient. He chose it because it was right. That's what makes it meaningful. She pulled up a holographic image. It showed a simple man in a janitor's uniform, holding a golden fruit. My father, yes, I call him that, showed us that individual courage can start systemic change. My mother showed us that true power is acknowledging when you're wrong. Together, they proved that empires can evolve. On Earth, in the rebuilt city of Seoul, an elderly woman named Sua stood before a monument. The statue depicted Doyun in his old uniform, the golden fruit in his hand. At the base were words in both Korean and Vrexian languages. Here stands Doyun, who showed us that the smallest act of kindness can change the course of empires. May we all have the courage to do right when it matters most. Sua was 93 now, one of the last humans who remembered the conquest. She had lived through slavery, liberation, and the transformation that followed. She placed flowers at the base of the monument, as she did every month. Thank you, she whispered to the statue, for reminding us what it means to be human. She was not alone. Dozens of people visited the monument daily. Humans and aliens alike made pilgrimages here. It had become a symbol of hope, a reminder that dignity and compassion were worth fighting for. Back on Vrexus Prime in the palace gardens where everything had begun, Prince Talon walked with Doyen. Talon was 27 now, tall and confident, being groomed for a position in the diplomatic corps. But he still sought out his old tutor's company whenever he could. "Do you remember when you asked if I liked you more than treasure?" Doyen asked, sitting on a bench beneath the golden tree. "I remember everything from that day." Talon sat beside him. "I've been thinking about your answer lately. You said people matter more than things, but you didn't just mean me. You meant everyone." "That's right. I'm being sent to negotiate with the Kelton sovereignty next month," Talon continued. "They still practice slavery. The diplomatic corps wants me to ignore it for the sake of trade agreements." He looked troubled. "What should I do?" Doyen was quiet for a moment, looking at the young man who had once been a crying child. "I can't tell you what to do anymore, Talon. You're not a child. You're going to be a leader. But I can tell you this. When you're faced with a choice between what's convenient and what's right, the decision you make defines who you are, not just to others, but to yourself. Even if it costs everything." "Especially then." Talon nodded slowly. "Then I'll tell them we don't do business with slavers anymore. That we'll help them transition to fair labor, but we won't profit from suffering. The council will be angry." Doyen smiled. "Your mother might surprise you. She usually does." That evening, the royal family gathered for dinner. This had become tradition over the years. A private meal where titles and formality were set aside. Crown Prince Kale, now 42 and preparing to inherit the throne, raised his glass. "A toast," he announced. "To Doyen, the janitor who taught us that empires are measured not by their power but by their compassion. To the man who showed us that every being deserves dignity." "To Doyen," the others echoed. The old janitor looked around at the faces surrounding him. The empress who had shown mercy. The commander who had found redemption. The children, now adults, who had learned to lead with kindness. This family he had never expected to have. "I just gave a hungry child a piece of fruit," he said softly. "No," Empress Vora corrected gently. "You showed us we had a choice. That we could be better than our history. That's worth more than all the treasure in the galaxy." As twin moons rose over Vrexus Prime, casting silver light over a city no longer built on slavery, Doyen understood something profound. His legacy was not fame or recognition. It was the millions of beings who now lived with dignity. The children growing up knowing compassion was strength. The young leaders like Talon who would carry these lessons into the future. He had stolen one fruit for a crying heir. The queen had watched and whispered, "Punish him." But in that moment of judgment, everything had changed. A question had been asked that could not be unasked. What kind of empire do we want to be? The answer was still being written, but it began with a janitor who chose kindness when it cost him everything. Across the empire, in schools and homes and workplaces, people told the story. Sometimes they got the details wrong. Sometimes they added parts that never happened. But the core truth remained. One person, acting with compassion in a moment of crisis, had changed an entire civilization. "Do you think it will last?" Doyen asked the Empress as the evening grew late. "The changes we've made, will they survive after we're gone?" Vora smiled. "Look at my children. Look at the young people graduating from the universities. They don't remember the old ways. They've grown up believing that all beings have worth. That's not something you can take back once it's been learned." "I hope you're right. Hope is what you gave us," she said. "Hope that we could be better. And we are. Not perfect, but better. That's all we can ask." In the human quarters, now transformed into real neighborhoods with real homes, Minji tucked her daughter into bed. The little girl born free would never know slavery. She would grow up with opportunities her mother had never dreamed of. "Tell me the story again," the child asked sleepily. "About the janitor and the prince." Minji smiled and began the tale. The hungry child. The forbidden fruit. The trial. The transformation. Her daughter had heard it 100 times, but she never tired of it. "Why did he do it?" the girl asked, as she always did. "Why did he risk everything?" "Because he was human," Minji answered, kissing her daughter's forehead. "And humans take care of each other. We take care of anyone who needs help. That's what makes us special." As the child drifted to sleep, Minji looked out the window at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Doyen was probably sitting on that balcony, watching the same stars. The man who had given her people hope. The man who had proved that kindness was not weakness. the man who had reminded the galaxy what humanity truly meant. And in the darkness of space, on ships traveling between stars, humans served alongside aliens as equals. They told the story to those who would listen. The janitor who stole one fruit and changed everything. It became more than history. It became legend. And like all good legends, it carried a truth that would outlive them all. That compassion was stronger than conquest. That courage meant doing right even when it cost everything, and that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness could shake empires to their foundations.